Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We resume again. Same statement of financial position. No? Kuwa, are you ready?
Opo.
And Nat, are you ready?
Po.
Okay.
Medyo maingay lang po sa amin. Pwede na po mag-umpisa.
Oo.
Okay, sige po.
So,
Good day.
hanggang,
Ingay.
hanggang dyan na lang palaki niyan. Ganyan na
Wait
lang
lang
yan.
po. Good day everyone. I am Rosanico and I will discuss the contingent liability, contingent asset, equity, and shareholders equity. Contingent
Rose,
liability po.
Rose,
Po.
gusto mo ba yung sa akin, baka malaki-laki?
Nalakayan ko pa po.
Ha? Ayan. Ikaw pala
Okay na
eh.
po.
Pwede ba yung i-rotate?
Naka-rotate na po.
Naka-rotate na yan?
Opo.
Sige, yan na. Okay na.
Okay po. Contingent liability, past 37, paragraph 10, defines a contingent liability in two ways. A contingent liability is a possible obligation that arises from past event and whose existence will be confirmed only by the occurrence or non-occurrence of one or more uncertain future events not wholly within the control of the entity. A contingent liability is a present obligation that arises from past event but is not recognized because it is not probable that an outflow of resources embodying economic benefits will be required to settle the obligation. The amount of the obligation cannot be measured reliably. Again, contingent liability is not recognized as liability. It will be disclosed only. The uncertainty relating to future events can be expressed by a range of outcome. The range of outcome may be described as follows. A. Probable. The future event is likely to occur. As a rule of thumb, probable means more than 50% likely. B. Reasonably possible. The future event is less likely to occur. C. Remote. The future event is least likely to occur or the chance of the future event occurring is very slight. Kapag po bumase tayo sa percentage, 0 to 49 or 50% po yung remote, it means may ignore po lamang siya. Kapag naman po exact 50%, ito ay possible na ma-disclose as contra asset. Kapag po more than 50%, tinatawag itong probable na ma-recognize as provision. Kapag naman po more than 95%, ito po ay reasonably possible na ma-recognize as liability. Treatment of contingent liability. A contingent liability is not recognized in the financial statements. However, if the present obligation is probable and the amount can be measured reliably, the obligation is not a contingent ability but shall be recognized as a provision. An expense and an estimated liability shall be recorded in recognizing a provision. Thus, a contingent liability is either probable or measurable but not both. A contingent liability shall be disclosed only. The required disclosures are A. Brief description of the nature of the contingent liability, B. An estimate of its financial effects, C. An indication of the uncertainties that exist, D. Possibility of any reimbursement. If the contingent liability is remote, no disclosure is necessary. Again, if the amount can be measured reliably, the obligation is not contingent ability but shall be recognized as provision. Contingent asset, past 37, paragraph 10, defines contingent asset as a possible asset that arises from past event and whose existence will be confirmed only or the occurrence or non-occurrence of one or more uncertain future events not wholly within the control of the entity. Contingent assets usually arise from unplanned or other unexpected events that give rise to the possibility of an inflow of economic benefits to the entity. An example is if claimed that an entity is pursuing through legal processes when the outcome is uncertain. Treatment of contingent asset. A contingent asset shall not be recognized because this may result to recognition of income that may never be realized. However, when the realization of income is virtually certain, the related asset is no longer contingent asset and its recognition is appropriate. A contingent asset is only disclosed when it is probable. If the contingent asset is only possible or remote, no disclosure is required. Again, contingent asset, it will not recognize as asset but only disclose when it is probable. Equity. The term equity is the residual interest in the assets of the entity after deducting all of the liabilities. Simply stated, equity means net assets or total assets minus liabilities. Equity is increased by profitable operations and contributions by owners. Conversely, equity is decreased by unprofitable operations and distributions to owners. The terms used in reporting the equity of an entity depending on the form of the entity are A. Owner's equity in proprietorship, B. Partner's equity in partnership, C. Stockholders' equity or shareholders' equity in corporation. However, the term equity may simply be used for all business entities. Under Pass 1, Paragraph 7, the holders of instruments classified as equity are simply known as owners. Shareholders' equity or stockholders' equity is the residual interest of owners in the net assets of a corporation measured by the excess of assets over liabilities. It also known as the capital of the corporation. Shareholders' claims against the assets, since equitor, it is the residual balance, means it is actually the assets over liabilities. Generally, the elements constituting shareholders' equity with their equivalent IAS term are Philippine term, capital stock, subscribed capital stock, common stock, preferred stock, additional paid capital, retained earnings or deficit, retained earnings appropriated, revaluation surplus, treasury stock. While IAS term, share capital, subscribed share capital, ordinary share capital, preference share capital, share premium, accumulated profits or losses, appropriation reserve, revaluation reserve, and treasury share. One of the components of shareholders' equity is contributed capital, which are share capital, share premium, subscribed share capital, and subscription receivable. Share capital is the portion of the paid-in capital representing the total par or stated value of the shares issued. Under nito ang ordinary na may voting rights at yung preference naman ay preferred. Share premium is the capital contributed by the shareholders in excess of the par or stated value of the shares subscribed and issued. In short, it is the additional paid-in capital. Next, subscribed share capital is the portion of the authorized share capital that has been subscribed but not yet fully paid and therefore still unissued. It is unissued because, according to the revised Corporation Code of the Philippines, it is illegal to issue shares until those shares are actually fully paid. Lastly, subscription receivable shall preferably be reflected as a deduction from the related subscribed share capital. However, subscriptions receivable collectible within 1 year shall be classified as a current asset. This actually the remaining balance or unpaid balance of the subscribed share capital. Ito ay ina-expect na marireceive within 12 months or less para ma-recognize as receivable in current assets. However, if beyond 1 year, ma-recognize naman to as contract equity account. That's all po. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, the equity and the contingent. Asan ba si Lawrence? Lawrence, nandiyan ka ba?
Opo,
Lawrence.
sir.
Di ba parang ano, parang copy-paste ito ng ano, intermediate accounting part 2, no?
Yes po.
Oo. Balik din yun eh. Okay, so parang copy-paste to ng ano, intermediate accounting part 2. Balik din. Okay, we go to the next portion by Lat. Lat, sige nga, share mo sa amin ang iyong nabasa, natutunan.
Wait lang po. Start na po ako.
Mm-mm.
Retained earnings. Retained earnings represent the cumulative balance of periodic net income or loss, dividend distributions, prior period errors, changes in accounting policy, and other capital adjustments. Unappropriated retained earnings represent that portion which is free and can be declared as dividends to the shareholders. Appropriated retained earnings represent that portion which is restricted and therefore not available for any dividend declaration. A deficit is a debit balance in retained earnings. The deficit is not presented as an asset but as deduction from shareholders' equity. Revaluation surplus. Revaluation surplus is the excess of sound value over carrying amount of the revalued asset. Sound value is equal to the fair value or depreciated replacement cost. Depreciated replacement cost is equal to replacement cost minus accumulated depreciation. Carrying amount is computed by deducting accumulated depreciation on cost from historical cost. Treasury shares are entities' own shares that have been issued and then reacquired but not cancelled. Treasury shares are usually recorded at cost and are not recognized as an asset. The cost of treasury shares should be reported as a deduction from the shareholders' equity. When treasury shares are acquired, the retained earnings must be appropriated to the extent of the cost of the treasury shares. Reserves. The term reserves is not officially defined in any accounting standard or in the conceptual framework. Reserves form a substantial part of the equity of an entity. Under International Accounting Standard, the use of equity reserves is based on whether a reserve is part of distributable equity or non-distributable equity. Distributable equity is that portion that can be distributed to shareholders as dividends without impairing the legal capacity of the entity. This squarely pertains to unappropriated retained earnings. Non-distributable equity is that portion that cannot be distributed to the shareholders in any form during the lifetime of the entity. Generally, non-distributable equity reserves represent those items of equity other than the aggregate par or stated value of share capital and retained earnings unappropriated. Example of reserves: A share premium reserve is the excess over the par or stated value or popularly called in additional paid-in capital. B. Appropriation reserve is earmarking of retained earnings of a certain purpose which may be required by law, contract, or the result of a voluntary action of management. This reserve is technically known as retained earnings appropriated. Examples include retained earnings appropriated for treasury shares, for bond redemption, for preference share redemption, for plant expansion, and for contingencies. C. Asset revaluation reserve arises from the revaluation of property, plant, and equipment. Especially, this reserve is called revaluation surplus. D. Other comprehensive income reserve. Line items, statement of financial position. Pass 1, paragraph 54 states that as a minimum, the statement of financial position shall include the following line items: 1. Cash and cash equivalents. 2. Financial assets other than 1, 3, and 6. 3. Trade and other receivables. 4. Inventories. 5. Property, plant, and equipment. 6. Investment in associates using the equity method. 7. Intangible assets. 8. Investment property. 9. Biological assets. 10. Total of assets classified as held for sale and assets included in disposal group classified as held for sale. 11. Trade and other payables. 12. Current tax asset and liability. 13. Deferred tax asset and deferred tax liability. 14. Provisions. 15. Financial liabilities other than 11 and 14. 16. Liabilities included in disposal group held for sale. 17. Non-controlling interest. 18. Share capital and reserves. The listing of the line items is not exclusive. Paragraph 54 simply provides a list of items that are sufficiently different in nature and function to warrant separate presentation on the face of the statement of financial position. Paragraph 55 provides that additional line items, headings, and subtotals should be presented on the face of the statement of financial position when such presentation is relevant to the understanding of the financial position of an entity. The judgment on whether additional line items are presented separately is based on the assessment of the following: A. Nature and liquidity of assets. B. Function of assets within the entity. C. Amount, nature, and timing of liabilities. Forms of statement of financial position. The format of a statement of financial position is not specified in Pass 1. In practice, there are two customary forms in presenting the statement of financial position, namely a report form. This form sets forth the three major sections in a downward sequence of assets, liabilities, and equity. Account form, as the title suggests, the presentation follows that of an account, meaning the assets are shown on the left side and the liabilities and equity on the right side of the statement of financial position. Actually, the statement of financial position is an expansion of the accounting equation assets equals liability plus equity. Pass 1, paragraph 57 provides that the standard does not prescribe the order or format in which line items are to be presented. In the Philippines, the common practice is to present in the statement financial position current assets before current assets before non-current assets, current liabilities before non-current liabilities, and equity after liabilities. Other formats may be equally appropriated provided the distinction is clear in accordance with paragraph 7 of the preface to IS1. Note that the format of the statement of financial position as illustrated in the appendix to IS1 is in the following order: current assets, equity, non-current liabilities, current liabilities. This may the practice in other jurisdiction like United Kingdom. So ito po yung example ng report form po. So yung Paul's Guitar Shop Incorporated, Statement of Financial Position, and yung date po, sila po yung tawag po dyan is yung headings. So according po dito sa book, lahat yung pag po report form is yung asset and liabilities po is written po siya vertical. Sunod-sunod po yung current assets, non-current asset, current liabilities, non-current liabilities, and owner's equity. Tapos po, ito pong total other assets, yan po yung subtotals na sabi nga po dito is kailangan po naka-include po siya, nakalagay po siya sa mga statements po. And ito po yung example ng account form. So, yung ito po is nahati sa dalawang section. Yung sa left side po ay nakalagay yung assets and the left side yung liabilities and owner's equity. These two format po is na pinapractice po siya here in our country, but in the other country like United Kingdom is meron po silang other jurisdiction na nasusunod na ang nauuna po nilang ilagay sa statements is yung non-current asset, current assets, equity, non-current liabilities, and current liabilities. Yan lang po. Thank you.
Okay. So, tingnan ko kung meron ako ba pakikita dito. Okay. Okay. Lahat nakikita mo ba? Lahat.
Apo. Ay, blurred po.
Lahat. Kita mo ba? Oo. Blurred. Now, blurred ba? Paano ba
Po.
pagpa-tinaw nito?
Yan ngayon hindi
Basahin mo
na
nga.
po.
Kuya, can you get my book,
Basahin mo
Sample,
nga.
please?
meron po ako sa book. Sample Act Company, Statement of Financial Position, December 31,
Okay.
2020.
Okay, class. Okay, okay. Class, I want you to see, no? Yung mga minention ni Plat, no? Oh, may sinabi siyang presentation ng Statement of Financial Position na report form. Vertical. So makikita mo, the current assets. So notice yung yung numbering dito, no?
Zero yung
Ito yung notes to financial statements. Yan ang notes, yung numbering na yan, referencing. Followed by the non-current assets, the total assets, the liabilities and equity, ang una, current liabilities. Sumunod yung non-current liabilities, followed by the shareholders' equity, and then the total liabilities and shareholders' equity. Okay. Ito yung report form, Vertical. Ayan, mga notes, no? Parang bine-breakdown lamang kung ano yung mga line items. The cash and cash equivalents composed of, okay, enumerated. Note 2, ano yung mga group as trade and other receivables. Note 3, ano ang composition ng inventories. Note 4, ano yung mga prepaid expenses. Number 5, enumeration ng land, building, machinery, furniture. Then number 6, ano yung mga long-term investments. And then 7, may patent, may trademark, intangible assets. And note 8, other non-current assets. Ano yung mga naka-lodge sa trade and other payables. Note 10, ano yung mga reserves. Ito naman yung account form, no? Ganun din, kaya lang yung presentation. Such that sa one side, yung all assets, the current and non-current. And the other side, all liabilities and equity, starting with the current liabilities, non-current liabilities, and then equity. Ito yung familiar tayo, no? Ito yung most commonly presentation makikita mo sa Pilipinas, the account form. Now, ito naman ang United Kingdom form, no? Pag napunta ka sa Singapore, Canada, South Africa, India, and other members of the British Commonwealth, huwag ka magugulat kapag ganito yung presentation nila ng Statement of Financial Position. Ano ba ito? Report form? Report form to, no? Report form, pero UK style, ang nasa taas, non-current assets. Sa baba, current assets equals total assets. O baliktad, no? Equity and liabilities. On top, equity, followed by non-current liabilities. And then nasa baba, current liabilities. Yan ang presentation, United Kingdom style. So, kung mabibigla, okay, nasa Canada, hawak-hawak mo, Statement of Financial Position. baliktad, ano? Okay. So there ends the discussion or matters related to statement of financial position. Before we go to the next area is about notes to financial statements, the related parties, and also the events after the reporting period. That will be the next topics, ano? Any question at this point, guys? Uh, that Mary Rose. Meron palang rose to. Dalawa palang roses natin dito. Oo. Okay, so the screenshot portion this time.
Ikaw naliligo. Got stuck up in my head.
Sino ba ang ano natin dito? Sino ang chairman? Si De Los Santos. De Los Santos.
Puso.
May klase ba sa bukas ng umaga?
Sir, wala pong klase ng 7 to 1 p.m. kasi wala din naman po tayong schedule na. Puro
Oh.
hapon po yung schedule po namin.
Ano lang? Ano? Alin ang wala?
May
Graduation
May
program.
announcement po yung sa ano na 7 to 1 p.m. po kasi po ang schedule po ng klase namin ay panghapon pa po.
Ay, gano'n. Oo. Hindi naman natin pwedeng balik na rin, ano? Kasi wala tayo sa UK. Okay, class. No question. Ay, kikita pa pala tayo, ano? 5:10, ano?
Wala daw sa
5:37.
Wala daw
Talaga.
sa UK.
Lagi tayo nakikita, eh. No? Oo. So, si Lawrence nandyan. Okay.
Opo.
Para may nagsalita. Si Lawrence. Okay, ready? Just say 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, smile. Okay na po.
Oo. Cherry, marami bang pagkain doon sa inyo? Punta kami.
Sir, baka magkulang.
Oo.
Sir, susunod.
In-invite mo ba sila?
Hindi po kasi po gabi na po.
Oo nga. Anong tanong mo? May tanong ka ata.
Hindi sir, wala. Sabi ko po next time na lang po.
Gabi na, baka, anong oras ba yun? Baka overnight pa yan. Okay, nag-register na. Okay. See you